Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body of 23rd of February 2021. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chairman for this meeting, please?
Proposed Councillor John Campbell.
Happy to second.
Councillor Campbell.
Yep, thank you very much, Tracy. Thanks everyone. Welcome to the Local Review Body, Tuesday, 23rd of February 2021. Could I ask Tracy to do the sitting, please?
Thanks, Chairman. We've got all 5 members present.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks very much. I would like you to take us through the procedure of the papers of the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I can confirm that there are 3 notices of review for consideration at the meeting today. And item number 4 is land to south of A712, approximately 500 metres to the east of the A712/A713 junction near Balmaclellan, refusal of planning permission for erection of workshop and installation of septic tank and soakaway, and formation of access and parking area and associated landscaping, reference 20/0566/FUL. Within your papers today, you've got your index, which includes your notice of review and related documents, the report on handling and related correspondence, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, comments of the applicant's agent on the observations of the appointed officer, the planning application form submitted on the 17th of April 2020 with associated plans and supporting information, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated the 11th of September 2020, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, photos of the application site and locality. Within the papers, you've got your grounds for refusal, which includes number 1, the proposed site is located in underdeveloped open countryside and is neither within nor adjacent to an existing settlement, nor is there an overriding site-specific need for a rural location. As such, the proposal would represent business industrial development in a rural area, contrary to the provisions of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 as set out in policies ED2 and ED1 Part B. The proposed business industrial development would be out of keeping with the rural countryside location and would introduce uncharacteristic element into the area as such that would have a significant adverse impact on landscape character and interest, nor would it contribute positively to the natural environment or sense of place and local distinctiveness. As such, the proposal would be contrary to the provisions of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 as set out in LDP2 policies NE2, OP1, Part C and OP2. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the range of procedures, being on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review in summary are: 1. A suitable site for a metal working business should offer conditions that will allow the business to run smoothly without having an adverse effect on neighbours or the general public. Any site should have sufficient space to accommodate the proposed structure, including all related and installations and services, and it should also offer some space for suitable growth in the future without the need for relocating the business again. The site has good transport links and suitable access for HGVs with good visibility. A power source is nearby. The site is located some distance from neighbouring residential properties. The existing premises at Wester Knockley is bursting at the seams and can't be expanded. The proposal would provide a new additional location to expand the business only 500 metres from the existing premises. Great care has been taken to have a building designed that minimises the impact on its location. The external appearance, the siting, design and general scale of the building is not uncharacteristic and similar to many other rural agricultural sheds in the area. With a footprint of only 660 square metres, it is smaller than most modern farm sheds. It is doubtful whether a casual passerby could immediately distinguish a silage shed or grain store with machinery parking in front of it from the proposed building. Extensive storage of products on the site is not proposed. Goods are taken off-site as soon as possible after production to avoid corrosion and to cash in on the product as soon as possible. The site was also chosen for its topographical layout, and the plans show how considerable parts of the development will be hidden from view from the public road and surrounding residents. Landscaping is proposed. Metalworking and blacksmiths remain a key part of the rural economy. In terms of noise nuisance to neighbours, the applicant is trying to address this by adding some distance to any neighbours. The business should be seen as part of the activities required to keep the rural economy in Glen Kens alive. The case officer's report confirms that there are no concerns regarding amenity, impact on nearby properties or road safety. This is a development that was effectively approved back in 2016 on a different piece of land. The arguments for and against both applications are the same. In 2016, the local review body decided that the benefits outweighed the doubts about the proposal. In its justification for the approval of application 15/P/2/0234, the local review body concluded that the development should be approved on the basis that, on the grounds that the proposed business is engineering, which is no longer compatible with settlements, and there is no viable alternative as the proposal is not close to any suitable designated area within the local development plan for such developments. The proposal will provide sustainable development and reduce carbon emissions by being closer to local bus, sustaining employment, and it is also close to an existing electrical supply and its existing customer base of Glen Kens. The site also provides an opportunity for future expansion growth that would potentially be constrained on other potential sites next to settlements. The proposal meets the requirements of SPP and is in accordance with the policies of Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2. In the absence of any suitable designated industrial area, LDP2 policy ED2 allows for development out with settlements. This case is a special one which, due to the economic benefits it represents for the area, which for a deviation from development plan without setting a precedent elsewhere. You also have a list of your development plan policies listed, and the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan in principle? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policies ED2 and ED1 Part B, given the proposed location of the site in open countryside? Is there an overriding need for this business industrial development at this location which could not be met within or adjacent to an existing settlement? Would the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 policies NE2, OP1 Part C and OP2 by virtue of its design, mass, finishes, proportion, scale and siting? Specifically, would it be out of keeping with its rural countryside location? Would it introduce uncharacteristic elements to the area? Would it have a significant adverse impact on landscape character and scenic interest? Would it fail to contribute positively to a natural environment or sense of place and local distinctiveness? If it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? If members are minded to not uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? If members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? Having outlined the documents within members' papers, it now falls to the local review body to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representations from any parties will be heard today. The options available to the local review body today are: it can decide that it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations. The local review body will be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who must provide it, resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak and on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves that it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, vary or reverse a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting. They are here to assist for this item only. It is confirmed that they have not had any involvement in this case and were not the case officer or the appointed officer for this application. They are purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process to the local review body. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the chairman now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead the local review body through the agenda papers and decide if it has sufficient information before it to make a determination today.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Apologies, member, I should have maybe brought this up at the start. Any declarations of interest? Ian, have you got your hand up for this?
I haven't got a declaration of interest. It was just in regards to a bit of clarity in the process here forward. So I'd like to conclude that bit first, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. So if there's no declarations of interest, the other thing I should have said at the start was I give my consent for remote participation. Ian, you'd like to raise a point?
Thanks, Chair. Please, if you don't mind. I wonder, will we be getting a photo montage? I know there hasn't been a requirement or an ask from the applicant here for the site visit, but can we make the decision in regards to the site visit? Do we have to make it now, or if we are able to see a photo montage, but are we able to see that first, Chairman?
I don't know about the photo montage. I don't know if I see we've got David Sutty and Andrew Robinson. If any of you can help us, does that help, Ian? If we can get the pictures up on screen.
Chair, we'll have slides that Andrew Robinson is the independent advisor for this item that he can go through. Yeah,
I suppose my point in the chair is it okay to come back to a potential site visit after seeing the slides? Would that be okay, or do we have to make that decision now?
I'm not sure. I mean, just let's have a wee look to see back to the notes. I think the first bullet point for the options available was to decide it has sufficient information before it to enable to determine the review today. So are you proposing that now, Ian?
I suppose what I'm saying is, can we come back to this particular point after seeing the presentation, the slides from the case officer? Would that be okay? From our appointed officer.
I'll need to get Tracy to advise me on this one, or at least somebody.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my advice would be normally the local review body would hear the planning advisor's overview of the case first, and they would show any slides. The members normally go through their agenda papers section by section in case they've got any points, and then at that point members would then decide whether they've got enough information to determine the notice of review today, and members could propose a site visit at that point.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Are you happy just that we proceed on that basis?
Definitely, Chair. Thank you. That clarifies it. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Okay, so it's over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, moving on to the first slide, which shows the location of this site. It's situated roughly between Balmaclellan and New Galloway, closer to Balmaclellan, and the site itself is situated about 500 metres from the junction with the A713. So it's situated on the south side of the A712. and it's indicated in red on the slide. So moving on to the next slide, it's basically showing the photograph. So this is the site access from the A712. You'll note from the slides that development has already commenced at the site, hence why it's retrospective or partially retrospective, this application. And moving on to the next slide. Again, that's a close-up of the access, which involves a water crossing over a burn. Moving on to the next slide, you can see where development operations have already started to commence. So the site itself is a greenfield land situated on the south side of the A713. Moving on to the next slide. And this shows another photograph of the site. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, but again, this is just showing another view of the site and the current operations taking place. And moving on to the next slide, which is showing the eastern boundary of the site. So it's looking south, but showing the eastern boundary. So you can see the topography of the landscape a bit clearer in this photograph, which is an undulating landscape. And moving on to the next slide. Again, some further pictures of development operations. And the next slide. And that's another photograph of the site. And move on to the next slide. So yeah, you can see here the extent of development that's commenced. Moving on to the next slide. And on to the next slide. Yeah. And then moving on to the final slide, which is looking. Okay, yeah, and then on to the next slide, which is the final slide. So that's looking back, that's looking north back towards the road. So that's all of the photographs and that's all of the slides associated with this item.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So am I right in saying, Tracy, you said that we go through each section one by one?
Yes, Chair, that's the normal procedure for the local review body, yeah. Okay,
members, if we go, we'll take them one at a time. The list of documents in section 1. Has any members got anything that they wish to raise? I don't see any hands going up. No questions. Okay, we'll go to section 2, which is the report on handling, determined under delegated powers and related correspondence. Any members got any points they wish to raise? No. In section 3, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review. Any points on that? I don't see anyone. Section 4, comments of applicant's agent on observation of the appointed officer. Any points? No. Section 5, planning application form submitted on the 17th of April 2020, associated plans and supporting information. Any points on that? No. Section 6, decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 11th of September 2020. Anything on that? No. Section 7, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2. Anything on that? No. In section 8, photos of application site and the locality. I think we've seen most of the photos in colour. I think they're exactly the same as what's in the document. Any points on that? No, I don't see any hands going up. So I think the next thing is to determine if we've got sufficient information before us today. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
So members, have we got sufficient information for today? I don't see any dissent or any hands. So I take it we have sufficient information for today. So I think the next thing, Tracy, is to open it up to debate. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, open up to debate and then members can make the decision of whether they want to uphold, reverse or vary the determination from the appointed officer.
Okay, members, it's opened up to you. I don't see any hands. Any points anybody wish to raise? Ian?
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose maybe just start the actual debate off. So obviously there's history in regards to this, particularly in regards to a previous application, but in a different location, which is slightly unfortunate, I would say. So it's already been through the local review body process in another guise, so to speak. So I've got some sympathy towards that, but I think I'm really quite keen because of the history on this site. To see the size and scale through the pictures, the size and scale of the actual development. It's quite extensive. I understand the arguments that have been put previously. They've been well outlined by the clerk previously in her comments. I understand why the local review body made its decision last time. But I think we've just got to take this seriously at the same time. I know we have, actually. So it's come to the conclusion. What is the right conclusion? And I'm being honest, I am unbalanced, Chairman. It's not straightforward for me, this one. I think you're on mute, Chair.
You're on mute, yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, Ian. Thanks for that. Anybody else got any points they wish to raise on that?
Hi, Chair, it's Duke here. I would kind of second Councillor Carruthers there in relation to getting to grips with the size and the scale of it and a potential site visit.
So have we got a proposal and a seconder on the site visit? Is that correct, Ian? You're making a proposal for a site visit?
Chairman, I'm happy, like I said, it doesn't other folk, and happy to support a site visit. I do think it's extensive. I think it's large, and making a decision like this, we shouldn't be taking it lightly. I think we should be considering all the facts. I think the photo montage has been good, but I would support a site visit, Chairman, in this case, just so we do understand the full size and scale of this development, how it fits into the landscape. Obviously, there's an importance of developments like this. They've been outlined in previous arguments and the current arguments today, but I think a site visit would be relevant and appropriate, Chairman, so I would support that.
So you do realise that, you know, site visits are a bit difficult during, you know, a lockdown?
I do, Chairman. I wonder if we could take advice in regards to that then. I mean, I know they're difficult. The one thing about a site visit is you can't date for home. So it isn't, I would imagine it be seen as essential. I know that with my own work, there's some things I've just got to be on site to carry out or at a particular place. So I do think it'd be manageable, Chairman. I understand the difficulties. Maybe it would be a site visit, as you see. I think we've got different options. So it may be not the normal practice, but we take another plan application process. Maybe it was some unaccompanied even, just so we can see the size and the scale. The only thing, if it was unaccompanied, I would like to think that there was at least one officer there that could make sure that we were there, be recorded to have been there on the day within a certain time. But that would certainly allow us to have appropriate social distancing and keep ourselves all safe, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Are there any other minded proposals other than a site visit? I don't see anybody coming in. Maybe we could just get some clarification on the advice. Would that be coming from you, Robert? Sorry, Andrew.
I can provide some advice on that matter. Obviously, it's open to members whether they want to go for a site visit on this one. I suppose one of the things that I was looking at when I've been looking through this is obviously you've got it is a different location where this is proposed, so I could see the benefit in maybe members wanting to see the difference between the two sites. There are, from the previous approval, there's a 250 metre difference, but the topography of the landscape is different, or does vary slightly. So it's obviously open to members to do that, and I don't know whether Tracy has anything that she'd like to add to that.
Tracy?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's one of the options open to members is to defer for a site visit. Obviously, at the moment, we would have to seek advice, and the site visit would be arranged when guidelines and safety allow us to undertake the site visit. So it would just be that there'll be a delay as to what we would normally try and schedule a site visit quite quickly. There may be some delay in getting that arranged, but we will arrange that as soon as it's safe to do so.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm probably looking for a wee bit of advice myself from Andrew. I mean, obviously this is a planning application in a different location to the previous planning application. The previous planning application went to an LRB2 and it was overturned there. And then there was a further application that came in, which was retrospective. I'm just wondering, should this particular application be retrospective as well, considering that the works have already started?
Judging from the photographs, it appears to me that it looks like that it's partially retrospective now. If that's indeed the photographs that have been taken, it appears to relate to the site that's before you. It would be my view that this application is now actually partially retrospective because works have already commenced. So that would be my opinion, that yes, it is a partially retrospective application, this one now. I'm not sure when those photographs were taken or indeed when development has commenced. Mention is made in the papers to February 2020, but it appears to me, looking at the photographs that are before you, that this looks to be a partially retrospective application now.
So could that affect our decision today?
I don't think it would affect the decision before you. It's not a criminal offence for works to commence. What implications it would have is the conditions. If you were minded to approve this application, it would ultimately have an effect on the conditions that you would attach to any approval. You couldn't simply just repeat the conditions that were attached to the previous permission, because some of those conditions were suspensive conditions, which obviously wouldn't be applicable. No, you would have to consider timescales, for example, in terms of when that information was to be submitted. But in terms of the decision as to whether this is an acceptable proposal or not, I don't think the fact that it's retrospective should have any bearing on the decision that you make today.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So we've got a proposal for a site visit. There is no alternative proposal. So, Tracy, can you tell the committee what the decision was, or remind us what our decision was?
Thanks, Chair. I didn't have it noted that it was formally a motion for a site visit, but although no other members are coming in with any other proposal, so if members are all in agreement, sorry.
Ian, I see you got your hand up.
If Tracy can hear us, she'll have the noise in the background, but happy to propose that, Chair. I do think what Andrew's saying, right, because it's partially retrospective, that's no part of to any great degree anyways. I wouldn't say it as being material in regards to the considerations of this application, but how far away it is from the previous site, the difference in topography, how it relates to the other sites that's been mentioned in the report. I mean, that's quite important to me. The only thing I would ask, Chairman, through yourself to Tracy, is that I'd rather see the site visit sooner rather than later. I'd certainly be more than willing to accommodate any way I can with correct social distancing or the appropriate type of social distancing, please. I know by my own work, like I've said previously, experiences on a daily basis, and it is possible. So it's just a matter of maybe not even getting out of the car, but being able to drive on site in a safe manner so we can see what's going on.
So you're formally proposing this, Ian?
Yes, Chairman, sorry, I am.
Okay. And was it Doug that was your seconder?
Yes, Chair. All points noted. I second that. Yes.
Okay. So Tracy, I think that was a formal proposal. Could you just remind the committee what the decision was?
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, there was a fire alarm going on there. Yes, the application has been deferred for a site visit to be arranged, and we will seek advice from our council COVID team and make sure that's arranged as soon as possible as guidelines allow.
Thanks very much. Can we move on to agenda item number 5? Do you want to take us through the process, Tracy? Or the procedure, rather?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Item 5 is 86 Eastwood Avenue, Stranraer. Refusal of planning permission for erection of extension to front elevation of dwelling, reference 20/1331/FUL. Again, within your papers, you've got your notice of review and related documents, report on handling and related correspondence, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, planning application form submitted on the 13th of August 2020, associated plans and supporting information, decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated the 19th of November 2020, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, and photos of the application site and locality. A note here that members should note that the applicant's agent did not receive the comments of the appointed officer by email on the 8th of January 2021. This was a procedural error, and the agent was given the opportunity to submit further comments prior to the meeting today, which were received on Friday the 19th of February. These were circulated to members in advance of the meeting today, so therefore the application can still be considered today at your meeting. The grounds for refusal are: the proposed extension is considered to be of an inappropriate scale and fails to respect and reflect the scale, proportions and essential character of the host dwelling, terrace and surrounding streetscape. As such, the proposal is contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2, policies OP2, design quality and placemaking, and H8 alterations and extensions to dwellings and associated adopted supplementary guidance. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review and summary are: the applicants require a front extension for bike storage to avoid bikes and bins and such like to be trailed through the house to the rear. The size of the proposed extension not unlike many in this area of Stranraer. Every planning application should be considered on its own planning merits, but should also be transparent through the region when making decisions, but this clearly has not been the case. This application complies with LDP2 policy H8 and supplementary guidance. For some reason, the case officer has not given consideration to the existing street scene nor the wider area, which has a vast amount of similar extensions. Also noting that a further 2 doors down with the same street scene, it steps out 4 metres. Design amendments were sought by the case officer to reduce the depth of the proposed extension by 500mm to 3.5 metres, and these were undertaken. The proposed extension has a modest footprint of 8 square metres. No neighbours objected to the proposal. The proposed extension does not over-dominate the existing building, with all materials sympathetic to existing, nor does it impact on the street scene, which has a vast amount of similar extensions. The proposed extension would not result in overdevelopment of the plot. The proposal would not have a detrimental effect on the privacy or residential amenity of occupants of the neighbouring dwellings. The proposed extension would not have an adverse impact on road safety. The external door referred to in the report was an external cold storage door, not an external access door. This door was built up over 20 years previously. You also have a list of your development plan policies, and the main issues for the local review body to consider is: does the proposal comply with the terms of LDP2 policies, OP2 design quality and placemaking, and H8 alterations and extensions to dwellings and associated supplementary guidance? Specifically, is the proposal of an inappropriate scale? Would it fail to respect and reflect the scale of the host dwelling, terrace and surrounding streetscape? Would the proposal fail to respect and reflect the proportions of the host dwelling, terrace and surrounding streetscape? Would the proposal fail to respect and reflect the essential character of the host dwelling, terrace and surrounding streetscape? If it is not considered that the proposal accord with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? If members are minded to not uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? If members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? Having outlined the documents within members' papers, it falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider this review. As with the previous case, no representations will be heard from any parties today, and the same options apply as the previous case. We have a different planning advisor present today for this case, which can confirm that they have had no involvement in the case, nor were they appointed officer of the application. I will ask the Chairman now to lead the debate, and first of all ask the local review body to go through the agenda papers and decide if they have official information to make a determination today.
Thanks, Tracy. Do we want to go through the same presentation as what we did before, or do we just go through the papers one by one? What's the normal procedure, Tracy?
Chair, I would suggest you go through the officer's presentation first and then go through the papers and sections.
So who's the officer giving the presentation? Who have we got?
Robert Duncan for this one, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Morning, Robert. Could you take
morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. Just to clarify, the pictures you will see have been provided by the case officer, and they replicate what you've got on pages 199 to 204 of your papers. It's also worth pointing out before I go through these that the applicant has also submitted photographs in relation to this case, and you can find those on pages 134 to 140 of the papers, and he's produced those to show other front extensions in the locality, just to give it a bit of balance. But what you're seeing here are the pictures that have been provided by the case officer. I haven't been out on the site myself directly, so I'm just really going to go on the basis of what I have in front of me. So if you look at the first slide, this is showing the application site. You can see it's a mid-terraced house in a block of 4. It's on the southern side of the street, just near Stranraer Academy. Go to the next slide. This is a view of the dwelling house. You can see the car parked in front. It's been modernised and updated, and that is the proposed location of the extension on the front elevation of that house. The next slide is just showing the street scene. Now this is looking in a westerly direction, so this is looking, if you like, towards Stranraer Town Centre, which is way in the distance. You can see the property in the middle distance there on the left-hand side with the grey door and the windows and the white frontage to it and the wall with the car parked in front. You can also see in the distance receding there, you have a number of canopies to front doors, and it seems to be a prevailing characteristic that you do have some driveways here as well. The next slide is looking in the opposite direction, so you can see the property there. Again, the middle distance, second on the right-hand side as you go along the street. with the white frontage, and there you can see the step in the frontages which the applicant's agent has been keen to draw to your attention. So once you've gone one beyond the host dwelling house, the frontage on the street scene, the next block of 4, if you like, juts out a wee bit, and you can see an extension on the first of those houses there. Moving to the next slide. This is a view from the rear elevation. So this has been taken from within the grounds of Stranraer Academy looking north. The house is the second from the right-hand side in this block of 4. So it's showing the mutual boundary between numbers 86 and number 88. The next slide is, this is from Google Street View. It goes back to April 2009. So the actual host dwelling house is the second one from the end on the right-hand side. There's obviously been quite a lot of change since this picture was taken. So you can see, for example, there was a canopy over the front door there, and there was another door just behind that wheelie bin you can see on the front elevation too. Clearly this was before there was a driveway and a car parking area at the front of the house, and before the windows were changed and the front elevation material was amended as well. Looking at the next slide, that's on the southern side of Eastwood Avenue, a streetscape from the vicinity of the host dwelling house. You can just see the gate pier there in the foreground, and the plant pot, if you want to call it that, or the planter, and that's looking west, so it gives you an idea of what the street scene is like in that locality. And the next slide is looking in an easterly direction. Again, you can see the gate pier, so that's the edge of the host property, and that's looking towards the east. And if you move to the next one, this is again looking east. This is on the northern side of Eastwood Avenue, so the opposite side of the street to the proposal, which is just out of shot here on the right-hand side. And again, that's looking along the street scene, so you get an idea of the prevailing characteristics in terms of canopies and the alignment of frontages. And the next one is again on the northern side of Eastwood Avenue. It's an opposite direction picture, so this is looking west along the frontage there, so you get an idea of the prevailing characteristic of that host neighbourhood. And I think if you look at the next slide, I think those are the end of the pictures.
Thanks very much, Robert. Has any members got any points they wish to raise with the case officer or the presentation? Ian?
Thanks, Robert, for that presentation. So see the pictures between, I think the same heights, 1, 3, 4 and page 140. So there is a number of pictures there. We certainly lead you to believe that actually it's a kind of standard size of extension. In fact, it wouldn't even be an exaggerated when you look at compare it to them. Whereabouts are these pictures that we've got within the report in comparison to the actual location? Do you know?
Robert?
Apologies, Chair, I just muted myself. I don't actually have an indication of where each individual picture is, which is slightly unfortunate. I just thought it was useful to draw those to your attention because they're part of the agent's submission. When I look at the captions on them, I'm just looking at that document just now, it's saying nearby street and housing estate, but it's not being specific about the location. There is one on page 137 at the foot of that page. You have a picture which shows the applicant's house within it, and you can see an extension there, but I've already pointed that out in the previous presentation. You have again that picture on page 138. If you look at the top picture there, that porch extension on the right hand side is the one on the southern side of the street that you can see looking in an eastward direction, but again that's already been presented. The other ones I know from background knowledge, for example, the pictures certainly at the top of page 139, I think that is Westwood Avenue. I think it's in that area just near to the Academy, but I can't really say with certainty where the rest of the pictures are, unfortunately, and they're not annotated. They just give examples of, you know, what the applicant's agent believes are similar front extensions in the general locality.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, we can come back to them later on, Ian, when we go into debate. Jim McComb, then Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Robert, could you go back to the first slide, please? Yeah, that's the one. There are indeed one or two extensions which can be seen on the map. Could I draw your attention to Ross Avenue, number 7? That is it, yeah. It is a property in a very similar position to the one we are considering, and it does appear to have both a front and rear extension. If we go to McMaster's Road, number 32, at the end, yeah. Can you see it there? Yeah, that's the one. It has a front extension, as indeed has number 40, just a wee bit further along the road. Now, they, of course, are end terrace sites, and they tend to have a wee bit more space. But undoubtedly, there has been a history of property extension here.
Jim, before I let Robert come in, I think we're kind of getting into debate here at the moment. So it was just really if you had any points that you wanted to bring up on the presentation.
That's fine, Chair, thank you.
Do you want to respond, Robert, before I move on?
I was going to say, Chair, what I can do, I'm obviously working at home. I've got access to my GIS system. If at any stage the members would find it helpful for me to, for example, highlight the dimensions of any of these particular extensions, I'm quite happy to do that. We've got a measuring tool in GIS. So if you're wanting to know, for example, how far a particular extension protruded from a front elevation, I'm quite happy to do that. It might take me a wee bit of time. It might not be an instant answer thing, but if members need dimensions like that at particular properties, I'm quite happy to provide that.
Would that be helpful, Jim?
It would indeed, Chair, yes, if Robert can spare the time to do that exercise.
I'm sure he would. Andy?
Okay, Robert, I suppose it's a kind of general question. I think, are we acknowledging that these examples that we've got in the printed pictures are actually in the same, broadly the same development area? They're within a street or a street and a half away from where the applicant site is. Is that a fair comment? I know they're not annotated, but they certainly look the same type of building and everything else. And we're only really talking about a one-sided street and then a double-sided street, and then from that you're heading towards the town, aren't you? So I suppose the question is there an acknowledgement that these are actually in the same housing development and relatively short distance from the applicant site?
I know from my personal knowledge, Chair, that some of these are within the close vicinity of the site, because I recognise some of the properties and I recognise the areas. Other pictures that have been provided by the applicant's agent, we're talking about the pictures here on pages, 134 to 140. I can't vouch with absolute certainty as to where they are because I'm just not that familiar with it. But what I can say is when you look at them, they look like they're within a similar type of development. The kind of the pattern of the housing, the character of it, the appearance is very similar. But what I can't say is hand on heart say they're all taken within a street or two of the development site, because I just don't have enough background knowledge. It's been too many years since I've been working in that area, unfortunately.
Yeah, can I come back in, John? Yeah, but the same hand on heart, we can't say they're not. So I think we can discuss that later on when we're in session. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Robert. So if nobody else wants to come in. We'll go through the papers. So we'll go to section 1, which is the notice of review dated 15th of December 2020. Any points anybody want to raise in section 1? No. Go to section 2, report on handling determined under delegated powers and related correspondence. Has anybody got any points they wish to raise? No. We'll move on to section 3, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent notice of review. Any points on that? I've got one that maybe Robert can help. It's on page 166. I'm looking for a wee bit of advice on this, Robert, because it mentions in paragraph 4, right at the very bottom, that an amended to a maximum depth of 2.4, but at the start of the presentation, I think there was it agreement that it was 3.5? So I'm kind of confused between the two dimensions there. Maybe you can assist me with that one.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's something I noticed myself when I looked through the papers. Now, when I looked at the communication from the agent for the applicant, he had inferred that the depth of the extension had been reduced to 3.5 metres, and initially I read that was in compliance with what had been requested. But then when I look further on within the papers, there are two emails from the case officer. There's one of the 13th of September last year, which is on page 159, and that is seeking changes to the proposal. And then there's a further email from the case officer of the 14th of October. This was last year too, and that's in pages 152 to 153. Now, when I look at what is being sought there, it's not simply a reduction to 3.5 metres, it goes above and beyond that. And the conclusion that I reached was the agent felt that the reduction to 3.5 metres was acceptable and a step in the right direction, such as it should have been approved. But the case officer was looking for a greater reduction. So in other words, a reduction to a maximum depth of 2.4 metres was what had been suggested. So yes, it was reduced, but not to the level that the case officer was seeking. But the applicant's agent is saying that the reduction now shown is acceptable.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Nobody else has got any points on that. We'll move to number 4. Planning application form submitted on the 13th of August 2020. Any points on section 4? No. Section 5. The decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council. Any points on that? No. Section 6. Relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local and Local Development Plan 2. Any points? No. Section 7. The photos of the application site and the locality. I think there's been a couple of points already raised on that. So anybody else got any points on now on those? No. Okay. I take it we're open for debate. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yes, Chair, if members determine that they have enough information to proceed today, yes.
Okay, members, do you have enough information to make a determination today? Ian?
I would move we have, Chair.
I'll second that, John.
I think it looks unanimous, so it's open to you, members. Does anybody want to kick off?
don't mind starting the debate, Chairman. Councillor Ian Crothers.
Okay, Ian, carry on.
I think so. I do think there's been a fair argument put forward, so I can see it from both sides. Again, for me, it's unbalanced, kind of like the one previously. Not so much the next one, but the previous one is in the same mind. So I do think that, okay, it's 8 square metres. That is a relatively small footprint in comparison to the general need maybe in that particular residential area. So they're looking for access to store bins, bicycles, such like, because they're terraced. So it's that particular reason. So it's not an end house. So I think there's a fairly justifiable reason to go against the previous decision, Chairman. But again, I am on balance. I maybe should have said earlier as well, because I forgot about it, Chairman, the declaration of interest. So I was contacted, I think most members were actually on Friday, by the applicant's agent, but just to say, listen, so that it was a very, very brief conversation. I think under the circumstances we were all called because in case there was any piece of information that we needed clarified, which none were needing clarified from myself, Chair. So I should have maybe said that earlier, just it slipped my mind. So still happy. I don't think there's any conflict there whatsoever. But I mean, I'm on balance with this, but probably leaning slightly towards supporting the application, I think, Chair, for review, just because of the particular needs in this area. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I did get the same phone call, but no discussion was made. Maybe we should all had declared that if we have received that phone call. But it hasn't changed my mind in any sort of way or determining any of the discussion today. So are you actually making a proposal to change the officer's recommendations? Because my understanding is that, you know, they could go ahead and still put up an extension. It's just the size that would probably be, you know, the different factor. But are you putting a proposal ahead, Ian?
I think, Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll be keen to hear what other members are thinking first, if you don't mind. At this moment in time, let's say I'm on balance, probably leaning towards actually supporting the actual application for review in these circumstances, but my mind's not made up yet, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other members wish to put any points across? Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got sympathy with the people here, you know, where they're required to have a number of bins outside their front door and everything else now. And I don't think it's that big. If I'm picking this up rightly from all it's no effect on the line of sight for anybody or view of anybody, and there's no objections from the next door neighbours, interestingly, who might potentially, we would have thought would have objected to this. My only worry is about the size of it. Does it need to be that size? And I'm not sure if we can put conditions on it. I think it's either, well, get advice for Robert, but I think it's either we accept what's here or we don't. I don't think we can put stipulations to make it smaller. Can I get that advice from Robert, please?
Robert?
Thanks, Chair. In relation to the size of the extension, my view would be you're here to determine what's in front of you. That's what was in front of the appointed officer when the decision was taken, and you're reviewing that decision. So I think it's important, if you're not comfortable with the proposal as it is, you could make the reasons for your discomfort obvious in your decision today, and then the applicant would still have the opportunity to submit a further planning application to reflect those comments if he wanted to. So the advice would be, rather than try and design it by planning condition, determine what you've got today. If you're uncomfortable with it in terms of its size, just make that clear in your decision.
Andy?
Robert, as always, thanks very much. That seems very common sense approach. Thank you.
Jim McComb?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 179, the north elevation. It does not appear out of place with the property, but when you look at the size of the plot, in the front of the house, the proposal does occupy a fair proportion of the plot.
So is that just an observation or
Yeah.
a question there?
Basically, I'm in agreement with Andy. I have a lot of sympathy with the householder here. The folks who are in mid-terrace properties are at a distinct disadvantage with regard to enlarging their properties. Those who are on end terrace sites have a significant advantage in terms of plot space.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I don't think the planning authority is stopping them from extending their house. I think it's just the size that's probably the crucial factor. Because originally I believe they wanted a 4-metre extension, which would have been extreme, I suppose. And I think the reduction is probably the concerning factor. They were asked to reduce it. They went back to 3.5 metres. That seemed to be acceptable, but then it had to go further than that. I think that's where the problem lies. Is where do we pitch in an acceptable size extension? So, Andy, you want to come in?
Thanks, John. Picking up what Robert said, I think he's absolutely right. It's the front extension that would be the bit for me. The rear extension seems a different thing altogether, and I'm kind of a mind that what we should be good in the road Robert kind of suggested to me was the sensible way forward, and that would be to, as what we've got in front of us today for me is an invasion of I would suggest too big. So the only way we can deal with that is to turn this down, but then in the rationale for turning it down, we say there's a sympathy with the applicant, and it's no because of the extension in the front, it's the size of the extension in the front that was causing us problems. We just need, I think, a form of words, and that then lets the householder come back with a more modest extension in the front of his house, or her house.
So you'd be happy for the form of words to be formulated by officers, Andy?
Well, Robert's got a really, I'm not sure if it was planning or English he studied at university, but I think normally we can find a form of words where we can say, sorry, on this occasion it's now no, because of the sheer size of the thing out the front. It would dominate the street, I would suggest. But there's an understanding here that then some more modest extension at the front would have been more in keeping. Putting that into planning, because this is outside our normal planning process. It's we don't make decisions here, do we? We do make decisions, but we don't make alternative decisions unless it's in the remedies available to us. So there's none of the remedies available to us that would actually do what I'm suggesting here, other than we say no, but we articulate in that decision why that there was a sympathy, but it was about the scale and size of the extension at the front of the house. I don't know if that makes any clearer.
Yeah, so is that an actual proposal as such?
Yeah, if we're at that stage, yes, I'm happy to make it a proposal if we're at that stage, and if between Tracy and Robert we can get a form of words that actually makes it legal. I think that's the important bit here. I think we need to go with the officer here to state the original decision, but we need to show sympathy for the householders, especially as Jim McComb said, mid-terrace. They're at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to storing stuff outside their houses and things. Yeah. So
if you're happy to propose that, I'm happy to second that. Andy. Ian, I see you got your hand up.
Thanks, yes, I've got some sympathies for what Andy, Councillor Ferguson is saying, but I'll just put my views on the table. So 3.5 maybe is just a wee bit big, but 3 probably would have done it for me. And I'll tell you why I would come to that conclusion, Chair. There's restricted access to the terrace houses in particular. So they've got limitations in regards to access to the rear of their gardens in this particular case. So they're looking for some type of storage at the front that allows them both to come in and act almost like a cloakroom, but separate to that at the same time with the size of the extension that's being considered here. They're saying, okay, we've got a wee storage to the side for bicycles and possibly bins and such like as well. I think because of the level of limited access they've got, I can see why they're asking for that, and I don't think it's inappropriate, but you've got to keep it within the street scene, the size, the scale, and so on and so forth. So for me, Chairman, I think it's an appropriate ask what they're asking, but they're probably about 500 mil, with it being overly precise. Maybe the engineering background coming into that, but I mean, that's probably in it for me, that's it. So they get an 8-9 foot internal footprint, which would probably still allow them to do in a slightly more confined space what they're trying to achieve anyways. It is larger and more domineering as what's in the very local vicinity. I think we've identified that. But the end terraces that predominantly got these have actually got access to the rear anyway, so they're under a different set of circumstances. And planning is about actually allowing people to live in appropriate accommodation as best we can. So I'm not against what Andy's saying by any means to any great degree, but it wouldn't take a lot of changing for me to bring this into an appropriate level. 2.4 is probably a bit restrictive for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. I see Jim's got his hand up. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I'm certainly agreed in principle with the concept of an extension here, and I honestly don't think it would require a huge reduction in scale to be acceptable. I think a very modest reduction could make this proposal acceptable.
So, are you making a proposal, Jim?
No, I'm going along with what Andy proposed.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll get Doug Fairbairn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to echo what's been said here today in this meeting, really, and what Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Ferguson said. And it's it's a difficult one, really, and I think the size is determined for their requirements as well. So I mean, I think to go any lower, they're going to be pushing for space for what they need it for. So yeah, it's a difficult one, really. So I'm kind of happy just to kind of go along with what's going to be proposed, if it's going to scale it down ever so slightly. But yeah, obviously it's for their requirements. That's why they've come to that conclusion size-wise, and have scaled it down anyway. So yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. So I think it seems that we're all in agreement with a form of words that the officers can formulate. It looks like we're upholding the officer's decision. Is that correct? I don't see any dissent. Tracy, could you maybe just remind us all what our decision was?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, members have agreed to uphold the case officer's decision, which is to refuse the application on the grounds that the proposed extension is considered to be of an inappropriate scale and fails to respect and reflect the scale, proportions and essential character of the host dwelling, terrace and surrounding streetscape. As such, the proposal is contrary to Dumfries and Galley Local Development Plan 2, Policies OP2, Design and Quality and Placemaking, and H8, Alterations and Extensions to Dwellings and Associated Adopted Supplementary Guidance. Within the decision notice that's issued from planning, there is the opportunity for us to add in the issues that the members have considered at the local review body, and in that section we can detail the comments made today about the sympathy towards the application and around the size and things, but the main decision will be that it's been upheld on those grounds, but we'll make sure the decision notice reflects the members' comments today.
Thanks, Tracy. Members content with that? Looks like we are.
Yes.
Thanks, Robert. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item 6, Cherrybank Racing Stables. We had something sent to us this morning. Tracy, do you just want to take us through that now?
Yeah, I'll cover that as part of my little speech here, Chair, so I'll just go through everything and then we can maybe come back to what we've been circulated. So item 6 is Cherrybank Racing Stables, Waterbeck, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house and garage, reference 20/1138/PIP. So within your papers, you've got your notice of review and your related documents, your report on handling and related correspondence, observation of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, comments of applicant's agent on the observations of the appointed officer, planning application form submitted on the 20th of July 2020, associated plans and supporting information, the decision notice from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated the 24th of September 2020, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, and photos of the application site and locality. The grounds for refusal are that it has not been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential at this location for the operational needs of the racing stables, and accordingly the proposal is contrary to the policy of the Council as stated in Local Development Plan 2, Policy H3, and to national policy as set out in the Scottish Planning Policy of June 2014, which permit the erection of new houses in the countryside only in special circumstances identified in development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. The applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. The applicant has also introduced new information which was not in front of the appointed officer when the application was determined. This new information comprises of a summary of additional information submitted after the decision was taken in response to the delegated report, details of a typical daily work schedule for staff, a legal statement in relation to ownership, a list of established racing stables, yards with owners on-site residential accommodation, an update of the supporting statement dated May 2020. The applicant's agent was asked to provide an explanation as to why these could not be in front of the appointed officer when the determination was made, and the applicant's agent has advised that he believes that these documents form an important part of the process. I circulated the confidential documents to members this morning, and if members wish to discuss this confidential information in detail, we would need to adopt the resolution to exclude the public from the meeting, and we would just pause the live streaming of the meeting. The members have to agree whether they are willing to accept this additional information that was not in front of the appointed officer as part of their determination today. The grounds stated in the notice of review are, in summary, other racing stables have residential accommodation on site, which is a standard requirement for racing yards such as Cherrybank. The 4 points raised in documents of the new information that I've already outlined are as follows. A condition of Mr. Bork's licence is that he is resident at the stable. A relaxation of his condition was granted in this case because he would be applying for planning permission for a house and he lives within a reasonable driving distance from the stable at Brampton. The owners of the racehorses kept at the stable would like Mr. Bork to live on site at Cherrybank Stables. The staff currently working at the stable do not live locally, they live in Brampton and Carlisle. Mr. Lowther, the landowner, runs a construction business from his private residence known as Cherrybank. Mr. Lowther has no involvement in the operation of the business known as Cherrybank Racing Stables, which is wholly owned and operated by Mr. Bork. The applicant intends to submit an application in the future to increase the number of stables on site in order to accommodate a further 12 horses. An email from Mr. Lowther's solicitor dated the 9th of September 2020 states that Cherrybank sits on its own discrete title, and over time Mr. and Mrs. Lowther purchased land around the house. The land purchased after the house has never been amalgamated with Cherrybank and they are not connected in legal terms. The letter from the British Horse Racing Association, which accommodated the planning application, accompanied the planning application, clearly states that it is essential that the trainer and adequate number of staff should always be present at the yard and not desirable, as stated by the case officer. Concerned and disappointed that the need identified by the British Horse Racing Association as being essential has been reduced to desirable by the case officer. The Cherrybank Racing Stables business is wholly owned by Mr. Burke. Mr. Lowther has no involvement in the operation of the business, but he does own the land on which the business operates. It is not unusual for a business to be operated within or on property owned by others. The case officer accepts that the viability and future growth of the business is not disputed on the basis of the operation and financial documents which are presented as part of the application. The ownership of the house known as Cherrybank is in the sole ownership of Mr. Lowther. He purchased in his own name additional land not in the name of Cherrybank Racing Stables, as this business did not exist then. The business commenced life on land already owned by Mr. Lowther. He has no involvement whatsoever in the Cherrybank Racing Stables business. To state that Mr. Lowther is actively running the stables is incorrect. There is no ongoing or established relationship between the stables and the owner of Cherrybank House. Mr. Lowther has no direct personal or financial interest in the business. This is a new business which can only operate in a total area. It complies with LDP 2 Policy H3.2 business requiring a rural location and should be supported. The land accompanied by Cherrybank Racing Stables will be transferred to the owner, Mr. Bork, of that business following approval of the planning application, now under consideration, and this has been confirmed in previous submissions and commented on by the planning officer. You also have a list of your development plan policies, and the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the development plan in principle? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP 2 Policy H3 in principle? Does the proposal accord with the guidance set out in the adopted LDP 2 supplementary guidance relating to housing in the countryside in principle? Specifically, has it been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential at this location for the operational needs of the racing stables? If it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development? If so, what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? If members are minded to not uphold the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? If members are minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required? It now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. As with the previous cases, no presentations will be heard from any parties today, and they have the same options available. Planning advisor is present for this item is David Sutty. He is there to assist members, and he has had no involvement in this case and was not the case officer or appointed officer for this application. So I'll now ask the chairman to lead the debate, and in the first instance ask the local review body if it has sufficient information before it to make a determination today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Ian?
Chairman, what I could ask if we use the same process as previously adopted with the other two, that we've run through this to a degree. We understand what information, the confidential information, we might have to get into private for that before we decide whether we've got enough information today to make a decision today or not. And that's the only piece for me, really. I'm not looking for a site visit with this particular application, but it's the confidential information. What does that mean in real terms in regards to a decision being made today? So if we could adopt the same process as previously, Chairman, I'd be quite pleased with that.
Okay, Andy?
Just to get governance advice, I think if we're going to discuss it in the confidential information that's come to light is going to be part of that discussion, we should be going into private session now. But I'm willing to take governance advice on that.
Tracy?
Thanks, Chair. I think if David could maybe take us through his slides and pictures first, and then we could maybe go through the sections as we have with the previous ones, and then at that point, if members wish to discuss the confidential information, we'll then switch off the live feed and exclude the public at that point, and then we'll reconvene the meeting after that.
Thanks, Tracy. Are members content with that?
Good suggestion, Chair. I think that's the right way forward.
Okay, I think we're in agreement with that. So if you want to give us a presentation, please, David.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Yes, quite happy to run through the slides for you. These are exactly the same photos as you have at the end of your agenda papers on page 337, running through to 340. So the first one just shows the application site outlined in red and the siting of the proposed house. You can see the proximity to Waterbeck there, and the property which is frequently referred to as part of this notice of review is Cherry Bank, and that you can see in the top right hand corner of the site. And indeed there's a path that runs from the bottom of the garden of Cherry Bank down to the actual stable buildings, which is just to the right of the centre of the slide. So the next photo just shows you an aerial slide of exactly the same thing. So again, you've got the centre, bottom centre of the slide shows where the stable buildings are, and you can see the track that runs up towards Cherry Bank. The actual application site itself is just off the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. So it's really just to give you an overall view of the riding stables. And the next one is taken at the southern elevation of the stables. Looking north, you can see the property Cherry Bank in the distance. And the final slide that we actually have is one which is looking southwest across the application site for the house itself, which is currently just a grassed paddock. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, David. Anybody got any points on the presentation? If not, we'll go through the each section. So section 1, the notice of review, dated 17th December. Any points on that? No. Section 2, report on handling. Handling determined under delegated powers and related correspondence. Any points on that section?
Chairman, if you don't mind, is that the delegated report we're looking at? I've got it online, I've got it in paper, just so much. Is it 221?
It's, yeah, well, it starts at 221. Yeah, you're correct.
Spot on, Chair. I have, Chair, if that's all right.
Okay, what do you want to say, Ian?
Couple of points. I'm looking at, so just for clear, I'm looking at, it's online, erected dwelling house garage, location Cherry Bank, stables, Waterbeck, application type, and its recommendation to refuse, and it's the report on handling, I think, but the actual delegated report of the decision. It's absolutely clear. So I suppose there's a few points in this particular point, Chair, and maybe bring these up later. So at paragraph 1.3, David, I'll go through them. I can go through them one at a time. I've probably got better going through them one at a time, just so I'm absolutely clear. So at paragraph 1.3, it refers to 2 points here. It's a Mr. Dara Bork and Dara Bork Racing. Could you distinguish the two and tell me what the difference is, please?
David.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, Mr. Bork is the applicant here, but he obviously operates and wholly owns the company of Dara Bork Racing. So they are sort of inextricably linked. They're effectively one and the same.
Ian?
Okay, I'll come back to that. It's clear at the moment in time. My understanding when I read that was, okay, one's the applicant, name of the applicant, but Dara Bork Racing is like a company, a business. but one being an individual, one being a business. I thought they were two different entities, but maybe we can get clarity on that. David's pretty clarity. Maybe we could. I don't know if David's
No,
come
I
back.
think that's a fair point, sir. Just for that, it is the company which is there with it, the racing stables within the complex. But as far as I can see on the application form, it is identified to him as an individual, but it is obviously related to the business. Otherwise, there would be no claimed essential need at all.
Yeah, excellent. That's what I thought. And so you're going to, at the end of paragraph 1.3, it says Cherry Bank and the stables are not connected. That's mentioned a number of times within the report, Jim. So I'd like to say I've got a few questions here. That's mentioned a number of times within the report. So in regards to that statement, that would, so when you read, I'm trying to get a clear understanding of what's going on here. So Cherry Bank, I think they're saying is the the dwelling house referred to Mr. and Mrs. Lowther stay in, and the stables, they're saying are not connected. So in as far as this report, what does that mean in real terms?
David?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, it took me a while to, not having been involved in this case, trying to get my head around this. I think what is quite relevant to this is what's on page 222 to 223 of the agenda papers here, which sets out a chronology of the planning history. What appears to have happened from my reading of this is that you've had a domestic property known as Cherry Bank, which is owned by Mr. Lowther. Then over time, from it being agricultural land that was adjacent to it, that has been bought up. Initially, you had 2012 domestic riding arena was granted permission again to Mr. Lowther. All the applications, you'll note, they are all detailed as being for Mr. Lowther. An equestrian establishment, the change of use, was an application in 2018, and that came before the Planning Applications Committee. It was a retrospective application which was approved. So again, all through this chronology, it's something which has incrementally grown up over time. That is, the owner of Cherry Bank has also been the owner of these adjacent land holdings and has carried out various developments, which is, as I say, incrementally grown up into a full-blown riding stables. It appears that what has happened is that Mr. Lowther is still the owner of the land. Mr. Bork is the owner of the business, and the business is operating on the land. But Mr. Bork is not currently the owner of the application site. So really there's two issues with the ownership. There's a procedural one, which is why the officer felt it was important to chase through that in my reading of the situation. That's simply to do with the fact that on the application form and in the procedures, you've got to be certain that all the relevant owners have been notified. And there was conflicting and contradictory information given to the case officer over time, but that has been clarified. So I think I'm quite clear in my mind that the situation is that the land is owned by Mr. Lowther. The applicant is Mr. Bork, who also runs the business, but he does not own the actual physical land on which the house is proposed. The relevance otherwise was really to do with just trying to establish what physical connection there was between Cherry Bank and the development. At the time of the previous applications, as shown on the photo, there was an actual physical link between Cherry Bank and the riding stables and the other things there. So there was a physical and ownership connection going back through that planning chronology. That has apparently changed, that the actual riding stables are now run by a third party, but the ownership is with somebody else. That's my reading of it. It is quite complicated, but I'm happy to answer any queries if members need any clarity.
No, thank you for that, David. Chair, I mean, I've still got a couple of other questions, but I mean, that was my reading as well. That was my understanding. So that last point in particular that you made, so there is ownership. There has been, I suppose, a linking as far as ownership is concerned, but what's been applied for today looks certainly like, so there's a business called Dara Bork Racing, and the head of that business is Dara Bork, has applied for this particular application. He has applied for a dwelling within the confines on this piece of land. And I think one of the things when I was reading this, David, to be honest, one of the first things we get told in a part of our training, which you're aware of, because it was yourself that gave us it, that actually material consideration when it comes to land, it's not material consideration. So I did get a bit confused when I read this, but it is very, very interesting in this case. I thought it was really good, almost for the CV and try to get an understanding. So at 4.4, the last sentence in that, it says whether a house is essential depends on the specific needs of the business concerned and not the personal preferences or circumstances of the individuals involved. I suppose I'll come back to that. So I'm just looking at the bits I've highlighted here. I'll come back to these particular points. At 4.8, I've noted it's accepted that a certain level of on-site residence is desirable for animal welfare and security at the site, out with normal working hours. However, it's noted that the owner of the site lives in very close proximity at the dwelling known as Cherry Bank. So David, again, I'm maybe rehearsing, starting to go over the same things, but because it's contained within the report and it was my reading of it, and we probably will have to go into a private session at some time and consider the confidential information, but without straying into that, again, that it's understanding that link that's been presented in this original decision report, which to me, going back to the point I've just made about land ownership, material consideration, actually, it's quite clear, and it's within this information we've got in front of us, that there's no link, is what we've been told, no link between the owner of the land. It could be the Duke of Buccleuch, for all this really matters, that owns the land, but ultimately this is a parcel of land where an application has been applied for a new dwelling, and there's a business case that certainly looks in the face of it that it stacks up. So I wonder if you've got any comments in regards to that piece, David.
David?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, it's absolutely correct. Planning permission runs with the land. It doesn't run with the applicant or indeed the current owner, and things can be sold on. So what you are looking at here is an application for planning permission principle for a house with a claimed essential need for the business. I think there was some ambiguity during the processing of the application as to what the linkage was, and it's understandable. As I say, if you look back at the chronology of the various applications and how they all came from one individual who is still the owner of the site. But it is absolutely correct, land ownership is not the material consideration here. I suspect as well, it's maybe one of the points that you're going to come on to. I think paragraph 411 on page 227 of the report is actually critical here. You'll be aware that there was another planning application before in a very similar, not identical, they overlap location, where there's a house claimed for essential agricultural need, and that was refused unanimously by the Planning Applications Committee in October 2017, and was then the subject of an appeal to the Scottish Ministers, which was dismissed. So obviously, the principle of a house for an essential agricultural need has been looked at in that location before, and one of the key things was to do with its proximity, because you do have Waterbeck nearby, but it's not regarded as falling within the envelope, the confines of the village of Waterbeck. So it's really looking at whether or not there's an operational need for supervision on that site that couldn't be met within some property in Waterbeck or some other nearby property. So it's not just a desirable need, that's quite clear. I think another point that's maybe worth making, maybe anticipating things that are going to crop up as well, is that the requirement of the British Horse Racing Authority is obviously a separate licensing status, that we are looking here at a land use planning consideration. So, for example, it doesn't automatically follow that if the council as a licensing body, as a licensing board, if they consider somebody to be a fit and proper person to run a licensed establishment, it doesn't mean that you're then duty bound to grant planning permission for that person who's a fit and proper person to have a public house in an inappropriate location. So there are separate pieces of legislation. It is something that you obviously have to bear in mind, that this is something which they have said is a requirement of their licence, but you've got to look at the land use planning issues to do with whether or not the need is essential. Hope that helps.
Thanks.
So, sorry, I'll tell you what I'll do. No, thanks very much, Chairman. Thanks for that, David. It does help. I mean, so I have picked up on 4.8, 4.9, 4.10, 4.11, 4.12, and in fact 4.16, 4.17 as well. But rather than me rehearse it, probably better wait until we get into debate. And maybe some of this, the confidential information needs to be discussed as well in private. We'll come back to this, Chair. But thanks. I'll leave it there now because I've got quite a number of questions. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, David. That's been helpful. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's quite clear from what David has said that Mr. Burke is the knowledgeable person with regard to horse health and training. Is that correct, David?
David?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, clearly he is the applicant. He's the operator of the business on the site, and therefore he is the person who has the operational knowledge. Absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, David. If we'll move on to section 3, which is the observations of the appointed officer. Is there any points being clarified on that? I don't see anybody. Section 4, comments of applicant's agent on observation of the appointed officer. Any points on that? No. Section 5, planning application form submitted on the 20th of July 2020. Any points on that? No. Section 6, the decision letter. Any points on that? No. Section 7, the relevant extract from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2. Any points? No. And section 8 is the photos of the application site and the locality. Any points on that? Don't see any. So I suppose we need to determine, have we got sufficient information in front of us? Andy Ferguson.
I'm suggesting we go into private session so that we can actually see the late proposals from which are economically sensitive, so that we can get a fuller picture before we make a decision whether we've got enough information or not.
Okay. I've seen your hand going up, Ian. Was that going to be the same point?
Exact same point, Chairman. I think I would support what Andy's saying. I think it's appropriate now, before we make a final decision, we see we can discuss the confidential information that's been put to us in private, then come back and make that decision then. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, where do we go from here?
Thanks, Chair. I'll just confirm that we're agreeing to adopt the resolution to exclude the public, and if I could ask Sandy to switch off the live feed and put up the exempt screening up online and confirm when that's done, please.
Thanks very much. Right, members. Andy, I see your hands up.
Thanks very much, Chair. Given the information that's been made clear to us, I actually think when we get to the decision stage, I'd be happy to move that we actually overturn the decision of the original planning officer and incorporate through our advisor some conditions, because I appreciate we have to do that. So I'd be moving that we actually overturn the refusal and take it forward from there.
Thanks, Andy. Ian?
Thank you, Chairman. I would support. So I appreciate, Chairman, you going into private session here, so we've had greater clarity without going into the detail, obviously, that in regards to the business case, the Labour report, so on and so forth. There's a number of things we looked at. So, I mean, I would agree. I think the case was probably, for me, was probably made in the first application, but would support what Councillor Ferguson is saying in regards to, we've had further detail today, we've a greater understanding, we've got better clarity in regards to the case, the close links between what the British Horse Riding Association says in relation to having a licence, which is fundamental to the business case, actually stacking up. Also, we've got the local vets saying that it's essential. We've got a number of saying that different organisations have wrote and said this is essential. The main person in this particular case, being the applicant himself, somebody of that level of skills and knowledge has to be on site. There's no two ways. There's no ambiguity around about that. So I do think the case has been made. Certainly help either move or support. Second, whatever's required in regards to this being approved out, so the review being upheld. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Ian. Are there any other minded proposals from any other members? I would like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation that we upheld the decision. So basically on the grounds that the applicant actually knew before the business was established there that there was no properties that anybody could use as a house. So and that's been long standing. So on that principle, I would propose that we upheld the officer's recommendations. So I'll be looking for a seconder on that. I see Doug Fairbairn.
Thank you, Chair. I would kind of agree with
You're losing your signal, Doug.
And Councillor Carruthers, there's a whole lot of it.
I'm sorry, Doug, I can't make what you're saying. You were breaking up, Doug.
Can you hear me?
What you were saying.
Can you hear me now? Aye.
Yeah.
You want me to repeat what you said then?
If you could, please, because you were just breaking up. I was just out what you were saying.
Fine. That's fine. I would agree with Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Ferguson. There's a huge lot of issues attached to this in relation to security. And there's been several trends of the horse theft and horse cruelty as well. So that aside, I would kind of agree with them on that one.
Okay. Ian Carruthers.
Yeah, I'd just like to have it on record that obviously, Ken, I take into consideration what you're saying in regards to the applicant would start this business. But it's clear within the business case, maybe that's not fundamentally in front of us. It's maybe contained within the private documentation. But this was a small business, small enterprise that started off, and it's growing. It's got every intention of growing, much larger to what it is at the moment as well. So, I mean, that is certainly part of my consideration, Chairman. I do think, number one, priority of the council is building the local economy. I know it's not a planning consideration, but certainly it's always in the back of their mind. So they have started from a small scale, they've outgrew themselves, and I think they've clearly shown and demonstrated that there is a need for that residential housing unit on this site, Chairman. So sorry, apologies, I can't come back and support you, but I'm quite strong with this, with views in this. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Given the submissions I've read from vets and from the British Horse Racing Authority, I'd be quite happy to support the proposal by Councillor Ferguson. You're dealing with extremely expensive animals here, and to my mind, there is a clear requirement for someone to be on site to look after the welfare of these animals. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Well, it doesn't look like I'm going to get a seconder. So, yeah. Okay, it seems to be the view of the committee that the decision should be overturned. So, Tracy, can you just remind the committee what the decision is, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, first of all, I'll just confirm that it's a unanimous decision from the committee to agree to accept all the additional late information, and that has been considered as part of making your determination of that review today.
Yes.
And then the decision of the committee is to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application as an exception to policy on the grounds that it's been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential at this location for the operational needs of the racing stables, and accordingly permits the erection of a new house in the countryside for special circumstances which have been identified in these circumstances in this case, and also subject to a number of conditions from members. Would you like me to go through the conditions in detail just for the record?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the suggested conditions are that no development in respect of this planning application in principle shall take place unless further applications accompanied by a plan showing all the matters specified in conditions 2 to 5 have been submitted to and approved by the council as planning authority. 2, on the layout, this shall include cross sections of the site showing Adam Point and final floor levels of the dwelling house, position of the dwelling house within the site, provision for car parking and garaging of vehicles within the curtilage of the site, and details of all accesses, fences, walls and hedges, and foul and surface water drainage. 3, on the design, this shall include plans, sections and elevations of all buildings and any other structures. 4, external appearance. This shall include a specification of the colour and type of all materials to be used on walls, roofs, windows, doors, rainwater goods and any other external finishes to the building. 5, landscaping. This shall show the treatment of land and any other buildings forming part of the site, including planting of new trees and shrubs, grassed areas, hedges, retained trees and other retained vegetation, details of level changes, hard surfacing, erection of walls, fences and other means of enclosure, formation of blanks, terraces or other earthworks, and the layout of gardens, courts and other amenity features designed to provide a landscape setting for the development. 6, that the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not be occupied unless the following have been provided within the application site. A, the off-street car parking areas shown on the approved drawings, formed in complete accordance with the said drawings or such other drawings as may be approved in writing for the purpose by the planning authority. And B, a turning area and a hard standing sufficient to enable a horse box to enter and exit the public road in forward gear at all times. Thereafter, the said parking and turning area shall be kept clear from obstruction and shall be retained only for that purpose for the lifetime of the development. 7, that the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not, unless a visible area has been provided on the southeast side of the access between the public carriageway edge and the line adjoining 2 points defined as follows. A, measures 2 metres back along the centre line of the access from the rear edge of the main carriageway, and B, measured 90 metres from the centre line of the access along the rear edge of the carriageway from the B722 public road. 8, that the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not be unless a visibility area has been provided on the northwest side of the access between the public carriageway edge and the line adjoining 2 points defined as follows. A, measures 2 metres back along the centre line of the access from the rear edge of the main carriageway, and B, measured 50 metres from the centre line of the access along the nearer edge of the carriageway of the B722 public road. 9, the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not be occupied unless everything exceeding 1 metre in height has been removed from the visibility areas referred to in conditions 8 and 9 above. Thereafter, nothing exceeding 1 metre in height, as measured from the adjoining carriageway level, shall be grown, placed or erected within said visibility areas. 10, that the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not be occupied unless the first 5 metres of the access from the B722 public road has been surface and materials or such other agreed in writing by the council as planning authority, and the said access has been trapped and drained to an outfall or soakaway as to prevent any surface water flowing onto the public road or onto the side from the public road. 11, that the dwelling house hereby granted planning permission shall not be occupied unless the gradient of access for the first 5 metres has formed so as to be no greater than 8%, 1 in 12.5. 12, that any proposed access gates shall not be less than 10 metres behind the public road carriageway and shall open into the site only. Conditions 1 to 5 reasons. Permission is hereby granted in principle only and no permission is granted for the details shown on the approved plans. Matters of detail are the subject, subsequential applications for approval by the planning authority. Conditions 6 to 12 are in the interest of road safety, and there will be the normal directives applied as well to the case, which is to comply with section 59.2 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. This planning permission in principle will expire 3 years from the date of this permission unless further applications for all of the matters specified in conditions attached to this permission have been submitted to the planning authority within that time period. Development in accordance with this planning permission in principle must be commenced within 3 years of the date of this permission or within 2 years of the final approval of matters specified in conditions, whichever is latter of these 2 dates. The developer must contact the team leader, roads maintenance and network coordinator prior to the commencement of works on site for information and specification details on the retrospective road opening permit, and we'll just provide them with details for to contact the roads team. And the council's flood risk management team have advised that the surface water runoff from the site during and after construction needs to be managed and should be mimic that of the existing conditions and should not be increased, and to note the advice of Scottish Water.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Before I close the meeting, when we talked about the site visit, when it comes back to the LRB, is it the same people that have to sit on that LRB?
Yes, Chair, I was just going to clarify that at the end. This meeting will just be adjourned now and will reconvene following the site visit. We can still go ahead and issue decision notices for the other 2 items in the meantime, but this meeting will remain open until we reconvene, and any members that don't attend the site visit cannot participate in the reconvened meeting. Okay, thanks very much, Tracy. Well, thanks everyone. Of no other business, so thanks very much. Sorry, Chair, I think Ian Crothers has got his hand up. All right, so he has. Ian?
Thanks, yeah. We just at that point had it up for that. You've touched on it, but I just wonder, will that happen within the next 4 weeks or something like that? Think of a timeline if the appropriate guidance is given to us, just so we're reconvened within 4 weeks. I think that'll be up to the planners. David might help us out with that one. David, are you still with us?
I am. That would actually be Andrew who would be dealing with that one, but we would have to take advice from the government team in terms of the COVID side of the situation. When we're in lockdown, I think it's going to be challenging. We still have one outstanding one for the Planning Applications Committee as well. Sorry, I didn't come back in after you came back into session, but I know you've gone through the item, but I just wanted to be clear you've got to give very clear reasons why you wish to make the decision that you did. Now, I was hoping that the LRB would clarify exactly the reasons for wanting to approve the house there. It was just for the clarity of the minute, isn't as much as anything else. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. So who clarifies the reasons? That'd be you, Ian.
Happy to come in, Chairman. So I just get the right earplugs in. Happy to come in.
Andy made a proposal, didn't he?
Okay, whatever. I can let Andy go first. But I was quite clear, I think, in my view. I can get into more detail on that. There was only one small weakness in regards to the argument. I did feel like that substantiated in the first application, but we received further information, certainly seen today in regards to the business case. There was a demonstrable link between the guidance being given from British Horse Riding Association. I know that's a licence, but ultimately the business case would fail, and the business would fail. It would become a pony training club rather than a national hunt type horse racing organisation. So I think it was fundamental with the guidance that was given to us, and it was clear within the information we got today that somebody has to be on site with the right skills and experience. I felt that was a particular need for me that was demonstrated. I felt there was I felt confusion in regards to the land ownership, but that was clarified through our planning guidance, Chairman. That was specific for me, but I know Andy will have his views.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Andy, did you want to say anything?
No, I think Ian's actually spoken for me there, because it was the security aspect and the requirement of the training licence that somebody remains on site. Jim McComb made a very important point as well, is that, and I think someone else did, I think it was Doug, we're not talking here about a couple of ponies for going pony trekking here. We're talking about high quality, very expensive thoroughbred horses. So there is a definite security issue here, and there's also a definite welfare issue here in terms of somebody on site who can deal with an emergency. The fact that the local vets are supporting it, the fact that it's a requirement of the licence to train, I think it just all leads to the same place. I think the only thing I would add to that would have been really handy if that information had been involved at the very start. We wouldn't have had I would suggest, some time off to actually to go and read it at this stage. We could have read it in time, but that's the only thing. That doesn't affect the decision. It would have been a lot neater if it had all been there earlier. But that, for me, that's the two issues are security and animal welfare.
Yeah, appreciate that, Andy. I mean, obviously we had the recess because, I mean, the exempt items had confidential, probably financial information in there. So, you know, could that be out there in the public domain? I don't know. I doubt it. But okay, so that's your reasons. Tracy, did you catch all that or most of it?
Yes, Chair. I think if David will confirm if I'm fine with my wording here, that it's to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application as a what's the word I'm looking for?
Exception to policy.
Exception.
Policy. Thank you. Sorry. Given the fundamental advice that's been provided from the British Horse Racing Association that someone is required on site for the operational needs, security and animal welfare, and therefore has shown special circumstances in relation to this application on why it should be an exception to policy. David, Are you happy with that?
David?
Yes, Chair, that's sound planning ground, so I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. Is that it then, members? Thank you. Well, there's no other business by me, and I look forward to seeing you on the site visit. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chair.
Chair.